The blaring alarms tore Marcus from a million-year cryo-sleep, the emergency lights flashing blood-red across his frost-covered face. His muscles screamed as he clawed his way out of the stasis pod, the icy air searing his lungs. He slammed to the deck, brain scrambling to make sense of the chaos around him. Staggering down the corridors of the sleeper ship Odyssey, Marcus gripped the bulkheads, fighting the rising panic in his chest. In the control room, a scene of utter horror greeted him. The shattered remains of his 3 crewmates' stasis pods lay strewn across the deck, their partially reanimated corpses still twitching. "What the fuck?" Marcus croaked, throat raw from disuse. The last time Log blinked on the monitor, the ship had been adrift for over 1,000,000 years, far longer than their planned century-long journey to Proxima Centauri b. The automated repair systems had kept the Odyssey intact, but something had gone catastrophically wrong with the revival process. Suddenly the radiation alarms blared. The power core was leaking, threatening to flood the ship with lethal radiation. Hands shaking, Marcus frantically worked at the controls, mind racing to recall training on systems centuries more advanced than anything from his own time. He had to contain the damage and stabilize life support, or he'd be dead in minutes. A proximity alert sounded. On the view screen, a massive alien vessel loomed, all dark angles and dripping with unrecognizable weapons. It eclipsed the Odyssey as it pulled the tiny human ship into its hangar bay with a powerful tractor beam. Marcus tried hailing them, but got no response. The airlock exploded inward. Reptilian humanoids in elaborate armor stormed the bridge, the tallest in the lead. To Marcus's shock, the alien spoke perfect English. "I am Pryler, First Sword of the Nigean Star Dominion," the alien announced. "This sector is restricted. Your ship will be seized, and you will be interned on Imperalis Prime until we determine your fate." Marcus tried to protest, but the aliens leveled their weapons at him. Pryler's eyes narrowed. "You cannot comprehend the power you face, primitive. Do not test my patience." With no other choice, Marcus raised his hands in surrender, legs shaking. He was utterly alone, the last human at the mercy of hostile aliens, in a universe that had moved on without humanity. He would have to use every ounce of wit and tenacity to survive this nightmare. Marcus slumped against the cold metal wall of his cell, the weight of 1,000,000 years pressing down on his shoulders. The stark white lights of the Ministry of Science glared overhead, casting harsh shadows across his haggard face. He had lost track of how long he had been here, subjected to an endless barrage of tests and examinations by the Nigean scientists. They poked and prodded at him, drawing blood, scanning his brain, testing his reflexes. They spoke to him only to issue commands, their reptilian faces impassive and cold. Marcus felt like a lab rat, a curiosity to be studied and dissected. But there was one Nigean who treated him differently. Kyrix, a junior researcher, had taken an interest in Marcus beyond the purely scientific. He would linger after the tests, asking Marcus questions about Earth, about his life before the Odyssey. And one day, he slipped Marcus a small device, pressing it into his hand with a furtive glance at the cameras. "This is a quantum computer," Kyrix whispered. "It has access to the info matrix, our database of galactic knowledge. I think you should know the truth about what happened to your world." In the long hours between tests, Marcus pored over the information, his heart sinking with each new revelation. Earth, his home, had been destroyed 1,000,000 years ago, struck by a rogue asteroid and ravaged by solar flares. Humanity was believed to be extinct, a footnote in galactic history. In the centuries that followed, the Nigean Star Dominion had risen to power, conquering and subjugating hundreds of worlds. The Pan-Galactic Union, the alliance Earth had been poised to join, had been crushed beneath the Nigean war machine. Its member species were now slaves, their planet stripped of resources to fuel the Dominion's relentless expansion. Marcus wept for the future that had been lost, for the billions of lives snuffed out by Nigean aggression. He was the last of his kind, a relic of a forgotten age, and he had awoken to a universe where hope seemed lost. Kyrix came to him again, his eyes haunted. "Marcus, I have to tell you something. Under our laws, you have no rights. The Science Ministry has petitioned the Emperor to have you dissected, to study how your species survived so long in stasis. They think it could hold the key to extending Nygene lifespans. Marcus recoiled in horror, his stomach turning at the thought. Kyrix, you can't let them do that, please, you have to help me. The young researcher nodded, his fists tight. What my people are doing is wrong. The conquests, the enslavement, the genocide. I can't be a part of it anymore. He leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. I'm going to get you out of here, Marcus, and I need your help. There's a rebellion brewing against the Dominion, a free galactic alliance. With your testimony about Earth, about what was lost, we might be able to convince them to aid our cause. But we have to get you off Imperalis Prime first. Marcus clasped Kyrix's hand, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the despair. I'm with you, he said. Whatever it takes. Let's make them pay for what they've done. The alarms shrieked through the Ministry of Science's sterile corridors as Marcus and Kyrix raced towards freedom. Marcus clutched the quantum computing device like a lifeline, his heart pounding in his chest. Kyrix moved with the grace of a predator, his eyes darting back and forth, alert for any sign of pursuit. This way, Kyrix hissed, pulling Marcus into a maintenance shaft. They crawled through the cramped space, the metal walls pressing in on them from all sides. Behind them, the sounds of booted feet and snarling hellhounds echoed through the facility. They emerged into the seething underlevels of the capital megacity, a labyrinth of twisting alleys and flickering neon. Towering spires of gleaming metal and glass loomed overhead, blocking out the stars. Kyrix led the way, his hand never straying far from the pulse pistol at his hip. A whirring sound filled the air, and Marcus looked up to see a swarm of hunter-killer drones descending from the sky. Kyrix cursed, shoving Marcus into a narrow alley as the drones opened fire, their plasma bolts sizzling through the air. They ran, their lungs burning, as the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Genetically engineered hellhounds, all fangs and rippling muscle, bounded after them, their howls echoing off the metal walls. Marcus stumbled, his legs threatening to give out, but Kyrix hauled him to his feet, urging him onward. At last, they reached the spaceport, a sprawling complex of landing pads and cargo bays. Kyrix led Marcus to a battered freighter, its hull scarred and pitted from years of hard use. This ship is bound for the Pegasus sector, Kyrix explained, his voice tight with tension. We can stow away in the cargo hold and— Halt! A voice boomed. Marcus spun around to see Prylar emerging from the shadows, flanked by a squad of heavily armed Nygene commandos. The First Sword's eyes blazed with fury as he leveled his pulse rifle at Marcus. Surrender, abomination, Prylar spat. You have nowhere to run. Kyrix stepped forward, his mind focusing. He is not an abomination, he said, his voice ringing with conviction. He is a sentient being, with the same rights as any of us. Prylar's lip curled in a sneer. You are a traitor to your race, Kyrix. You will die with this primitive scum. Kyrix met Marcus' eyes, a silent apology in his gaze. Then, with a roar of defiance, he charged at the Nygene lines, a thermal grenade clutched in his fist. The commandos opened fire, their plasma bolts ripping through Kyrix's body, but he kept coming, his eyes blazing with a fierce grit. The grenade detonated, the explosion sending Nygene bodies flying. In the chaos, Marcus ran, his heart shattering as he left Kyrix's broken body behind. He leaped into the freighter's cargo hold, slamming the hatch shut behind him just as the ship's engines roared to life. As the freighter blasted off from Imperalis Prime, Marcus huddled in the darkness. The quantum computing device clutched to his chest. Tears streamed down his face as he thought of Kyrix, of the sacrifice he had made to ensure Marcus's escape. I won't let you down, Marcus whispered into the shadows. I'll find the Free Galactic Alliance. I'll make the Nygenes pay for what they've done. The stars stretched into long lines of light as the freighter hurtled into hyperspace, carrying Marcus towards an uncertain future. He was alone now, the last of his kind, but he carried with him the hope of a galaxy long oppressed, and he would not rest until that hope was realized at any expense. The freighter shuddered as the Nigean battlecruiser locked on with its tractor beams, the metal hull groaning under the strain. Marcus's heart raced as he sprinted through the cargo hold, desperately searching for a way out. He couldn't let himself be captured again. Not after everything Kyrix had sacrificed to get him this far. His eyes fell on a battered escape pod, its hatch hanging open. It was a crazy idea, but it was his only chance. Marcus clambered inside, slamming the hatch shut, just as the freighter's alarms blared, signaling the Nigerians had boarded. With a hiss of hydraulics, the escape pod jettisoned from the freighter, spinning wildly as it shot out into the swirling colors of the Tauri nebula. Marcus gripped the controls, trying to steady the pod's erratic course. Behind him, the freighter disappeared, swallowed up by the battle cruiser's hangar bay. But Marcus had no time to catch his breath. The escape pod shuddered violently as it was caught in the gravity well of a rogue planet, a dark, ice-encrusted orb hurtling through the void. Marcus braced himself as the pod plummeted towards the surface, the force of the impact slamming him against the restraints. The hatch blew open, and Marcus stumbled out onto the frozen wasteland. The air was thin and bitterly cold, and he gasped for breath as he surveyed his surroundings. The planet's surface was a desolate expanse of ice and rock, pockmarked with craters and jagged crevasses. But as he looked closer, Marcus realized there was something else beneath the ice, the unmistakable outlines of buildings, their spires and domes glinting in the starlight. A city, perfectly preserved by the planet's frigid embrace. Heart pounding, Marcus made his way towards the ruins, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. As he drew closer, he saw that the buildings were constructed of gleaming white stone, their graceful curves and soaring columns reminiscent of the ancient architecture of Earth. He wandered through the silent streets, marveling at the eerie beauty of this long-dead civilization. The buildings were adorned with intricate friezes and faded inscriptions, their meaning lost to time. But as he studied them closer, Marcus felt a shock of recognition. The language, the symbol, they were ancient Greek. In the heart of the city, Marcus found himself standing before a towering obelisk, its surface covered in dense hieroglyphs. But these were no ordinary carvings. Interspersed with the alien script were words in Greek, in English, in a dozen human languages. It was a Rosetta Stone, a key to unlocking the secrets of this lost world. With trembling fingers, Marcus traced the inscriptions, his mind racing as he deciphered their meaning. This city, this planet, had once been a thriving colony of the Antikythera, a human civilization that had achieved the impossible, crossing the stars millennia before the fall of Earth. The hieroglyphs spoke of wonders beyond imagining, technologies that dwarfed even the mightiest achievements of the Nigerians, stargates that could bridge the gulf between galaxies, dark energy reactors that could power entire worlds, singularity drives that could outrace light itself. But there was something else, something that made Marcus's blood run cold. The Antikythera had not vanished peacefully into the mists of history. They had been at war, locked in a titanic struggle against the Khazra, the brutal precursors of the Nigerians. And in their darkest hour they had unleashed a weapon of terrifying power, the Phaedon anomaly. The obelisk spoke of a device that could unmake stars, that could shatter planets and tear the very fabric of space-time. A weapon that the Antikythera had used to destroy the Khazra homeworld before disappearing from the galaxy forever. As he stood there, the weight of this revelation crashing down upon him, Marcus felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. If the Phaedon anomaly still existed, if it could be found, it might just be the key to bringing the Nigerian Empire to its knees. The key to setting the galaxy free. Marcus's heart raced as he descended into the hidden vault, the ancient stone steps worn smooth by the passage of eons. The air grew colder with each step, and his breath misted before him in the gloom. At the bottom, he found himself standing before a massive door, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift and dance in the flickering light of his torch. As he approached, a hidden sensor flared to life, bathing him in a beam of blue light. There was a hum of power, and then the door swung open with a grating rumble, revealing a chamber that glowed with an eerie, pulsing energy. Inside, Marcus found himself surrounded by wonders beyond imagining. Sleek, crystalline devices lined the walls, their surfaces thrumming with barely contained power. He reached out to touch one, and it thrilled to life at his touch, projecting a shimmering hologram of the galaxy into the air before him. But it was the device at the center of the room that drew his eye. It was a small, unassuming cube, no larger than his fist, but it seemed to radiate an aura of profound importance. As he picked it up, it flared to life, and a figure coalesced in the air before him, a tall, regal man in the uniform of an Antikythera admiral, his eyes blazing with the light of long-lost stars. "I am Alexios Heraclius," the figure said, his voice echoing with the weight of ages. "If you are seeing this, then you are the last of our kind, the final hope for the galaxy." Marcus listened in growing horror as Alexios spoke of the Phaedon anomaly, of the terrible price the Antikythera had paid to contain it. He told of the Nigeans, of their mad desire to unleash the anomaly's reality-warping power and conquer the universe itself. "You must stop them," Alexios said, his gaze boring into Marcus's soul. "You must gather the artifacts we left behind, the keys to sealing the breach. Only then can the anomaly be contained and the galaxy saved from annihilation." Marcus nodded, his face hardened. "I understand," he said. "I won't let you down." Alexios smiled, a sad, weary expression. "I know you won't," he said. "You carry the hopes of a billion souls on your shoulders. May the stars guide your path." With that, the holocron faded, and Marcus was alone once more in the vault. He gathered up the devices Alexios had spoken of, a personal teleporter, a cloaking shield, a zero-point reactor, and stowed them in his pack. Then, with a final glance at the tomb of his long-lost kin, he activated the teleporter. There was a blaze of quantum light, a wrenching sensation of dislocation, and then he was gone, hurtling across the stars towards an uncertain destiny. As he raced through the swirling currents of the wormhole, Marcus clutched the holocron to his chest, his pupils dilating with the weight of his newfound mission. He knew that the path before him would be fraught with danger, that he would be hunted by the Nigeans at every turn. But he also knew that he had no choice. He was the last human, the only one who could stop the anomaly from consuming the galaxy, and he would not rest until that task was done, whatever it takes. The wormhole spat him out into a starfield he didn't recognize, the constellations strange and unfamiliar. Marcus checked the star charts embedded in the teleporter's memory banks and felt a chill run down his spine. He was in the Tartarus sector, a lawless expanse of space on the fringes of Nigean territory, where only the desperate and the damned dared to tread. But according to Alexios's data, this was where he would find the first of the artifacts he needed, an ancient Antikythera weapon known as the Spear of Athena. The spear was said to be able to pierce any shield, to strike down any foe, and Marcus knew he would need its power in the battles to come. He set course for the nearest habitable world, a seedy spaceport called Novaria Station, his stolen Nigean shuttle slipping through the void like a ghost. As he approached the station, he activated the phase-shifting cloak, the shuttle's hull rippling and fading from view. Marcus docked in a shadowy corner of the station's underbelly, stepping out into a world of neon and shadows. The air was thick with the stench of cheap booze and cheaper perfume, and the streets echoed with the clamor of 1,000 alien tongues. He made his way through the crowds, his hand never straying far from the pulse pistol at his hip. He could feel eyes on him from every corner, hungry gazes that sized him up like a slab of meat. But he ignored them all, his focus laser-locked on his objective. In a dimly lit back alley, he found what he was looking for. A seedy dive bar called the Broken Blade, its windows shuttered and its door heavily reinforced. Marcus shouldered his way inside, ignoring the surprised glances of the bar's patrons as he strode up to the counter. The bartender, a grizzled old Nigean with a cybernetic eye, looked up at him with a scowl. "What do you want, human?" he growled, his hand hovering near the plasma shotgun behind the bar. Marcus leaned in close, his voice low and urgent. "I'm looking for information," he said, "about the Spear of Athena." The bartender's scowl deepened, and he spat on the floor. "You're playing with fire, boy," he said. "The spear's not something to be trifled with. It's a relic of the old gods, a weapon of terrible power." Marcus nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I know," he said, "but I need it. The fate of the stars depends on it." The bartender stared at him for a long moment, his cybernetic eye whirring and clicking. Then with a grunt he reached beneath the bar and pulled out a small battered data chip. "This is all I know," he said, sliding the chip across the counter. "The spear was last seen on a planet called Xibalba, in the hands of a warlord named Kukulkan. But be warned, Kukulkan is not to be trifled with. He's a monster, a butcher of worlds, and he guards the spear with his very life." Marcus took the chip, his fingers closing around it like a talisman. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I won't forget this." The bartender shrugged, turning back to his drinks. "Don't thank me yet, boy," he said. "You've got a long road ahead of you, and the Nigeans will be on your tail every step of the way. May the gods have mercy on your soul." With that, Marcus turned and strode out of the bar, the data chip clutched tight in his fist. He had a lead, a glimmer of hope in the darkness, and he would follow it to the ends of the universe, no matter the dangers that lay ahead. For he was the last human, the final hope for a galaxy on the brink of oblivion, and he would not rest until his mission was complete, until the Phaedon anomaly was sealed away forever, and the universe was safe once more. Marcus braced himself as the quantum light of the teleporter faded, his molecules reassembling in a cavernous chamber deep beneath the surface of Zephyrus. Blinking away the disorientation, he found himself staring down the glowing barrels of a dozen plasma rifles, held in the trembling hands of the Omicron Persei sentries. "Don't move, intruder," one of the sentries barked, his voice cracking with fear. "Identify yourself or we'll vaporize you where you stand." Marcus raised his hands slowly, the holocron gripped tightly in his fist. "I'm not your enemy," he said, keeping his voice steady. "My name is Marcus Aurelian, and I come bearing urgent news for your leaders." The sentries exchanged nervous glances, their fingers tightening on their triggers. "A human," one of them muttered. "That's impossible. They've been extinct for 1,000,000 years." Before Marcus could respond, a booming voice echoed through the chamber. "Stand down, warriors," it commanded. "Lower your weapons and let the stranger approach." The sentries parted reluctantly, revealing a towering figure striding towards them. It was a Zorani, a race of hulking reptilian humanoids renowned for their brilliance and their eccentricities. The Zorani's scales shimmered with iridescent colors, and his eyes gleamed with a fierce intelligence. "I am Zorak Kilthun, Grand Arbiter of the Free Galactic Alliance," the Zorani said, his voice a rumbling bass. "Speak quickly, human. What brings you to our hidden stronghold?" Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Grand Arbiter, I come with a warning of the gravest importance. The Nigean Empire seeks to unleash the Phaedon anomaly, a cosmic horror that threatens to unravel the very fabric of the universe." Zorak's eyes narrowed, his crest flaring with skepticism. "The Phaedon anomaly is a myth, a bedtime story to frighten hatchlings. What proof do you have of this claim?" With a flick of his wrist, Marcus activated the quantum computing device, projecting a shimmering hologram of the galaxy into the air. The image zoomed in on a pulsing, sickly green mass, tendrils of distorted space-time radiating from its core. "This is the anomaly," Marcus said, his voice grim. "A rift in reality itself created by the Antikythera in their darkest hour. The Nigeans believe they can control it, harness its power to conquer the universe. But they're wrong. If they succeed, the anomaly will consume everything, leaving nothing but an endless void in its wake." Zorak stared at the hologram, his expression unreadable. "And how do you know this?" he asked, his voice a low growl. In response, Marcus activated the holocron, and the ghostly figure of Alexios Heraclius materialized before them. The Antikythera admiral spoke, his voice echoing with the weight of eons. "Grand Arbiter Keelthon," Alexios said, bowing his head. "I am Alexios Heraclius, last High Admiral of the Antikythera fleet. What this human says is true. The Phaeton anomaly is real, and it is the greatest threat our galaxy has ever faced." Zorak listened intently as Alexios recounted the tale of the Antikythera's high-stakes endeavor, of the terrible price they had paid to seal the rift. When the holocron fell silent, the Grand Arbiter turned to Marcus, his eyes blazing with a newfound grit. "You have brought us a great gift, Marcus Aurelian," Zorak said, his voice solemn. "The gift of knowledge and of hope, but I fear that hope may be slim indeed." The Zorani waved his hand, and the galactic hologram shifted, displaying the shattered remnants of once mighty fleets, the burning ruins of conquered worlds. "The Alliance is on the brink of annihilation," Zorak said, his voice heavy with grief. "The Nigeans have crushed our armies, ravaged our worlds. They have already seized most of the Antikythera ruins, plundering their secrets in search of the key to the anomaly." Marcus felt a cold dread settle in his gut, but he refused to let it show on his face. "There must be something we can do," he said, his voice fierce. "Some way to stop them before it's too late." Zorak was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant. Then, with a heavy sigh, he spoke. "There is one chance, one final hope. The legend of the Hyperion, the Antikythera's lost flagship." The hologram shifted again, displaying a sleek, angular vessel, its hull shimmering with an otherworldly light. "The Hyperion is said to be hidden in a pocket dimension, accessible only by assembling the 12 seals of the Zodiac, powerful artifacts scattered across the stars. Aboard the Hyperion, the last uncorrupted copy of the Antikythera's subspace array is believed to still exist, the only instrument capable of remotely closing the rift." Marcus felt a flicker of hope kindle in his chest. "Then that's what we have to do," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "We have to find the seals, recover the Hyperion, and seal the breach before the Nigeans can unleash Armageddon." Zorak nodded, his expression grim. "It will not be easy," he warned. "The seals are hidden on the most treacherous worlds in the galaxy, guarded by ancient traps and fearsome guardians. And the Maelstrom, the twisted region of space-time surrounding the Dyson sphere, is a nightmare to navigate, even for the most skilled astrogators." "I understand the risks," Marcus said, his face hardening, "but we have no choice. The fate of the universe depends on us." The Grand Arbiter studied Marcus for a long moment, his gaze piercing. Then, with a nod of respect, he turned to the sentries. "Summon Kyra Sunderwind, Galen Stormrage, and Tazor Ironheart," he commanded. "Tell them to report to the launch bay immediately. They have a new mission, one that will decide the fate of us all." As the sentries hurried to obey, Zorak turned back to Marcus, his expression solemn. "These are my finest operatives," he said. "Kira, an Arcturian Psyblade master. Galen, a Procyon demolitions expert. And Tazor, a Cephian astrogator who can navigate the chaotic currents of the Maelstrom. They will be your crew, your comrades in this impossible quest." Marcus nodded, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "Thank you, Grand Arbiter," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I won't let you down. I won't let any of us down." Zorak clasped Marcus's shoulder, his grip strong and reassuring. "I know you won't," he said. "You carry the hopes of a billion souls on your shoulders. May the stars guide your path." With that, the Grand Arbiter stepped back, and Marcus turned to face his new crew, their faces etched with commitment. Together, they strode towards the launch bay, towards the sleek, deadly ship that would carry them across the stars into the very jaws of oblivion. As the airlock sealed behind them with a hiss of hydraulics, Marcus felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. He knew the odds were stacked against them, that they were embarking on a mission from which they might never return. But he also knew that he had no choice. He was the last human, the final hope for a galaxy on the brink of annihilation, and he would not rest until his task was done, until the Phaeton anomaly was sealed away forever and the universe was safe once more. The ship's engines roared to life, the deck thrumming beneath his feet. Through the viewport, Marcus watched as Zephyrus fell away behind them, the planet's lush forests and gleaming cities dwindling to a tiny speck against the infinite dark. Then, with a flash of light and a rush of acceleration, they were gone, hurtling into the void, into the unknown dangers that awaited them beyond the stars. The Shadow Dancer knifed through the obsidian void, its matte black hull rippling with phase-shifted energy. In the cockpit, Tezor's webbed fingers danced across the control interface, guiding the stealth frigate through the treacherous hyperspatial currents of the Stygian abyss. Marcus stood behind the Xephian astrogator, the stars beyond the viewport reflected in his eyes. "Take us in, Tezor," he said, his voice tight, nice and steady. Tezor clicked his beak in acknowledgement, angling the ship towards the looming bulk of Necropolis. The planet was a corpse-grey orb, its surface pockmarked with jagged canyons and twisted spires of obsidian. As they descended through the ashen clouds, the landscape dedicated into a nightmarish vista of crumbling mausoleums and skeletal forests, the bones of long-dead trees reaching towards the starless sky. "Charming place," Galen muttered, checking the charge on his plasma rifle. "Reminds me of home." Kira shot the Procyon a withering look, her side blades shimmering at her hips. "Focus, Stormrage, we're not here for sightseeing." The Shadow Dancer settled onto a cracked landing pad outside the central sepulchre, a towering edifice of black stone, etched with eldritch runes. As the ramp lowered, Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, a primal sense of wrongness emanating from the structure. Tezor consulted his scanner, his crest flattening in concern. "I'm picking up some strange readings," he said. "Fluctuations in the quantum field like nothing I've ever seen." Marcus nodded grimly, drawing his ion pistol. "Let's move, the seal is waiting." They advanced into the sepulchre, their boots echoing on the ancient flagstones. The air was thick with the stench of decay, the walls crawling with pallid lichen. As they descended into the catacombs, the darkness closed in around them, broken only by the eerie glow of their lumens. Suddenly, a bone-chilling wail echoed through the tunnels, followed by the clatter of armored feet on stone. Marcus spun around, his heart pounding, as a legion of spectral Nigean soldiers materialized from the shadows, their eyes burning with unholy light. "Contact!" Kira yelled, her side blades flaring to life. She leaped forward, the searing energy slicing through the wraiths like a scythe through wheat. Galen opened fire, his plasma bolts vaporizing the undead warriors in bursts of ionized mist. Marcus and Tezor fought back to back, ion beams and quantum pulses scything through the horde. But for every wraith they banished, a dozen more took its place, an endless tide of necrotic horror. "There's too many of them," Tezor shouted, his voice ragged with exertion. "We need to fall back." Marcus gritted his teeth, a plan forming in his mind. "Galen, give me a charge," he yelled, pointing to the crumbling ceiling above the wraiths. The Procyon tossed him a plasma grenade, understanding dawning in his eyes. Marcus armed the charge and hurled it into the mass of undead, the explosive sticking to a spectral breastplate. "Get clear," he roared, diving for cover as the grenade detonated, the blast collapsing the tunnel in a cascade of shattered stone and vaporized ectoplasm. The team scrambled through the choking dust, emerging into a vast chamber lit by sickly green light. At the center of the chamber, the seal of the void hovered above a pedestal of black crystal, its surface swirling with eldritch energies. But between them and the artifact stood a towering abomination, a grotesque fusion of reanimated flesh and necromantic technology. "The Thanatos engine," Kara breathed, her face pale, "the Antikythera's darkest creation." The monstrosity lumbered forward, its massive fists crackling with dark lightning. Marcus and his crew opened fire, their weapons blasting chunks of necrotic matter from its hide. But the engine kept coming, shrugging off their attacks like raindrops. Galen lobbed a volley of plasma charges at the creature's feet, the explosions staggering it momentarily. Kyra seized the opening, leaping onto the engine's back and plunging her psi blades into its skull. The monster howled in agony, thrashing wildly as it tried to dislodge the Arcturian. Marcus charged forward, ducking under a sweeping blow and firing his ion pistol point-blank into the engine's chest. The beam punched through the abomination's armor, rupturing its dark matter core. The creature convulsed, black ichor spurting from the wound as it collapsed to the floor, its reanimating energies dissipating in a foul miasma. Panting, Marcus climbed the pedestal and claimed the seal of the void, the artifact thrumming with power in his grasp. Suddenly, a hologram flickered to life above the pedestal, the ghostly image of an Antikythera commander in full battle plate. "If you are seeing this," the hologram said, its voice distorted by eons of degradation, "then you have proven yourself worthy of the seal's power. But know that this is only the beginning of your trials. The seal of the cosmos, the key to unlocking the Hyperion's pocket dimension, lies on the planet Zathura, hidden in the depths of the miasma labyrinth." The hologram faded, leaving Marcus and his crew in stunned silence. But before they could process the revelation, the chamber shook with a deafening roar, dust raining from the ceiling. Tizor checked his scanner, his eyes widening in horror. "We've got incoming," he yelled, pointing to the readout. "A Nigean warfleet just dropped out of hyperspace in orbit. They must have detected the seal's activation." Marcus cursed, sprinting for the exit. "Back to the Shadow Dancer, now!" They raced through the collapsing catacombs, dodging falling masonry and spectral blasts. As they burst from the sepulchre, the sky above was filled with the deadly silhouettes of Nigean battle cruisers, their hulls jam-packed with singularity cannons. The team leaped aboard the Shadow Dancer, Tizor throwing himself into the pilot's seat. "Strap in!" he shouted, his fingers flying over the controls. "This is going to be a rough ride." The stealth frigate rocketed into the sky, its phase drive screaming as Tizor pushed it to the limit. Singularity torpedoes rained down around them, the warheads twisting space and time as they detonated. Marcus gripped his restraints, his teeth rattling in his skull as the Shadow Dancer bucked and wove through the maelstrom. With a bone-jarring lurch, the ship leaped into hyperspace, the stars stretching into long lines of light. Behind them, the surface of Necropolis erupted in a cataclysm of dark matter fire, the Nigean bombardment reducing the planet to a seething inferno. Marcus slumped back in his seat, the seal clutched to his chest. They had survived, but only just. And with the Nigeans hot on their trail, he knew their mission had just become infinitely more perilous. But as he looked around at his crew, their faces grim with grit, he felt a flicker of hope kindle in his heart. They were the galaxy's last chance, the only ones who could stop the Phaedon anomaly from consuming everything in its path. And they would not fail despite the toll. The Shadow Dancer hurtled through the kaleidoscopic maelstrom of hyperspace, the ship shuddering as Tizor fought to keep it on a course. In the common room, Marcus paced restlessly, his mind racing with the implications of their discovery on Necropolis. The Shadow Dancer hurtled through the kaleidoscopic maelstrom of hyperspace, the ship shuddering as Tizor fought to keep it on course. In the common room, Marcus paced restlessly, his mind racing with the implications of their discovery on Necropolis. "The Nigeans are relentless," Kira said, her voice tight. "They'll stop at nothing to claim the seals before we do." Marcus nodded grimly. "Which is why we need to stay one step ahead. Tizor, how long until we reach the Celestial Cascade?" The Cephian consulted the nav computer, his webbed fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "We should be dropping out of hyperspace in—" Suddenly the ship lurched violently, throwing the crew from their seats. Alarms blared as the Shadow Dancer slewed out of hyperspace, the viewports filled with the blinding light of colliding neutron stars. "What's happening?" Galen shouted over the cacophony, struggling to regain his footing. Tizor's eyes widened as he scanned the sensor readouts. "We've been pulled out of hyperspace by a massive gravitational anomaly. The Celestial Cascade. It's even more unstable than we thought." The ship bucked and heaved as the competing gravitational fields of the neutron stars tore at its hull. Marcus staggered to the viewport, staring out at the cataclysmic stellar ballet before them. Vast arcs of plasma leaped between the colliding stars, the superheated gas glowing in impossible colors. Shockwaves of distorted space-time rippled out from the impact zones, warping the very fabric of reality. It was a vista of terrifying, unearthly beauty, a glimpse into the primal forces that shaped the universe. "We need to get out of here," Kira said urgently. "The radiation levels are spiking if we stay too long." Her words were cut off by a piercing proximity alert. Tizor checked the scanners, his crest flattening in alarm. "We've got incoming," he said, his voice grim. Multiple contacts, closing fast. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Need jeans?" Tizor shook his head. "Negative. These readings, I've never seen anything like them." Suddenly the ship's alarms fell silent, replaced by an eerie pulsing hum. The lights flickered and died, plunging the crew into darkness. "They're jamming our systems," Galen said, his voice tight with fear. "Some kind of subspace interference." Marcus drew his iron pistol, the weapon's charge casting a faint blue glow across his face. "Kira, Galen, with me. Tizor, see if you can get the power back online." The three crept through the darkened corridors of the Shadow Dancer, their footsteps echoing in the unnatural silence. The air was thick with tension, the only sound the pounding of their own hearts. Without warning, a flicker of movement caught Marcus's eye. He spun around, his pistol leveled at the shadows. "Did you see that?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. Kira nodded, her psi-blades shimmering to life. "We're not alone." Suddenly a hissing sound filled the air, followed by a strangled cry. Marcus whirled around to see Galen clutching at his neck, a slender dart protruding from his flesh. "Neurotoxin," the Procyon gasped, his eyes rolling back in his head as he collapsed to the deck. Marcus and Kira spun back to back, their weapons at the ready. The shadows seemed to come alive around them, writhing and twisting in impossible shapes. "Show yourselves!" Kira shouted, her psi-blades casting an eerie light across her face. A low guttural laugh echoed through the corridor. "As you wish, Arcturian." The air shimmered, and a squad of Nigene shadow assassins materialized before them, their matte black armor seeming to drink in the light. They moved with an inhuman grace, their monomolecular blades glinting in the darkness. "Surrender the seal," the lead assassin hissed, his voice a rasping whisper, "and your deaths will be swift." Marcus and Kira responded with a barrage of ion fire and psi-blade strikes, the corridor erupting into a whirlwind of violence. The assassins moved like liquid shadow, their blades slicing through the air with preternatural speed. Marcus ducked and weaved, his pistol barking as he fought to keep the assassins at bay. Beside him, Kira was a blur of motion, her psi-blades carving glowing arcs through the darkness. But for every assassin they felled, another seemed to take its place, materializing out of thin air with a hiss of displaced atoms. They were being overwhelmed, the weight of numbers driving them back inch by bloody inch. "We can't hold them," Kira shouted, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "There's too many!" Just as all seemed lost, the Shadow Dancer lurched violently, sending assassins and defenders alike tumbling to the deck. The lights flickered back to life, and Tizor's voice crackled over the intercom. "Brace yourselves. I'm going to try something crazy." Marcus felt the ship accelerate beneath his feet, the inertial dampeners straining to compensate. On the view screen, the neutron stars loomed closer and closer, their gravitational fields warping the fabric of space-time around the Shadow Dancer. Tizor was attempting a slingshot maneuver, using the immense gravity well of a collapsing neutron star to catapult the ship out of the celestial cascade. It was a desperate gamble, the slightest miscalculation spelling certain doom. The assassins, their phase shifters burned out by the intense gravitational shear, rematerialized fully as the ship hurtled past the point of no return. They screamed in agony as the neutron star's titanic tidal forces tore them apart at the molecular level, their bodies dissolving into streams of superheated plasma. Marcus and Kira clung to the bulkheads, the G-forces crushing the breath from their lungs as the Shadow Dancer skirted the edge of oblivion. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed as if the ship would be dragged over the event horizon, consigned to an eternity of gravitational hell. But with a bone-jarring lurch, the Shadow Dancer broke free of the neutron star's grip, riding the crest of a shockwave into the clear void beyond the celestial cascade. On the viewscreen, the stellar maelstrom receded into the distance, a churning cauldron of light and fury. Marcus and Kyra sagged against the bulkheads, their bodies shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. Galen, having recovered from the neurotoxin, joined them on unsteady feet. "That was too close," the Procyon muttered, rubbing his neck. "I never want to see another shadow assassin again." Tizor's voice crackled over the intercom, filled with relief and wonder. "Guys, you need to see this." The crew stumbled onto the bridge, their eyes widening as they beheld the vista before them. Floating serenely against the backdrop of a shimmering golden nebula was a lush green world, its sapphire oceans and emerald continents gleaming in the starlight. "Avalon," Marcus breathed, a smile spreading across his face. "We made it." The Shadow Dancer descended through the planet's atmosphere, the ship's sensors homing in on the coordinates etched into the seal of the void. They landed beside a cascading waterfall of liquid light, the photons dancing and swirling in an endless, mesmerizing pattern. As the crew disembarked, they found themselves standing before an ancient Antikythera temple, its crystalline spires reaching towards the heavens. The air was suffused with a sense of peace and timelessness, as if the very essence of the universe had found harmony in this sacred place. They entered the temple, their footsteps echoing off the translucent walls. At the heart of the sanctuary, they found the seal of the cosmos, a shimmering orb of pure space-time suspended in a delicate web of quantum filaments. As Marcus reached out to claim the seal, the air before him shimmered and coalesced into a figure of light and energy, a sentient hologram, its features wise and ancient. "Welcome, Marcus Aurelian," the hologram said, its voice resonant with the weight of ages. "I am Merlin, guardian of the seal and guide to the champions of old." Marcus bowed his head in respect, the seal of the cosmos thrumming with power in his hands. "Merlin, I have so many questions. The Phaedon anomaly, the Nigean threat. How do we stop them?" Merlin smiled, his eyes twinkling with the light of distant stars. "You have already taken the first steps, young champion. By claiming the seals, you have set in motion the ancient plan laid down by the Antikythera eons ago." With a wave of his hand, Merlin conjured a shimmering star map, the glowing points of light representing the hidden locations of the remaining seals. Marcus and his crew studied the map intently, committing the coordinates to memory. "But be warned," Merlin said, his voice growing solemn. "The final seal, the seal of the soul, can only be claimed by one who has proven their worth in the eyes of the ancients. You must pass the trial of the ancients, a series of tests designed to challenge your wisdom, your courage, and your compassion." Marcus nodded, his eyes hardening with commitment. "I understand. I will not fail." Merlin smiled, his form beginning to fade. "I know you won't, Marcus. The future of the stars rests on your shoulders. May the stars guide your path." With that, the hologram vanished, leaving Marcus and his crew alone in the temple. They looked at each other, the weight of their mission settling heavily upon them. "No pressure, right?" Galen quipped, trying to lighten the mood. Kyra shot him a look, but there was a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. "Let's get back to the ship. We have a lot of work to do." As they made their way back to the Shadow Dancer, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He scanned the tree line, his hand resting on the butt of his ion pistol. Suddenly a flicker of movement caught his eye. A figure cloaked in shadow darted between the trees, disappearing into the undergrowth. Marcus froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that silhouette, knew it with a certainty that chilled him to the bone. It was Pryla, the Nigean first sword. Somehow, impossibly, he had survived their last encounter, and now he was here, on Avalon. Hunting them. Marcus forced himself to keep walking, to act as if he had seen nothing. But inside, his mind was racing, trying to process the implications of Pryla's presence. If the first sword was here, then the Nigians must have tracked them through the celestial cascade. And if they knew about Avalon, then they must also know about the seals. The race was on, and the stakes had just gotten higher than ever. Marcus and his crew would have to move fast, staying one step ahead of their relentless pursuers as they sought out the remaining seals. But first they had to pass the trial of the ancients, and something told Marcus that this would be the greatest challenge they had faced yet. As the Shadow Dancer lifted off from Avalon's surface, Marcus stared out the viewport at the rapidly receding temple. The seal of the cosmos glowed softly in his hands, a tangible reminder of the destiny that had been thrust upon him. He was the last human, the final hope for a galaxy on the brink of annihilation, and he would not rest until the Phaedon anomaly was sealed away forever, and the universe was safe once more. But as the ship hurtled into the star-strewn void, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that their greatest trials were still to come, and that the fate of everything he held dear would soon hang in the balance. The Shadow Dancer streaked through the void, its phase drive thrumming with barely contained power. In the cockpit, Tezor's webbed fingers danced across the control interface, guiding the stealth frigate through the treacherous asteroid fields and ionic storms that guarded the next seal's resting place. Marcus stood behind the Cephian, his eyes fixed on the holographic star map flickering above the console. The seal of the Tempest, the ancient symbol of the Antikythera's mastery over the elemental forces of the universe, pulsed with an eerie blue light, beckoning them onwards. "We're approaching the coordinates," Tezor said, his voice tense. "Scanners are picking up multiple Nigian warships in orbit around the planet." Galen checked the charge on his plasma rifle, his face grim. "They know we're coming. We'll have to fight our way through." Marcus nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his ion blade. In the weeks since they'd left Avalon, he'd grown stronger, his mind and body honed by the constant battles and the ancient knowledge of the seals. He could feel the artifact's power coursing through his veins, whispering secrets of the cosmos in his dreams. "We've come too far to turn back now," he said, his voice steady. "The Tempest seal is the key to unlocking the full potential of the Antikythera array. We need it if we're going to have any chance of sealing the Phaedon anomaly." Kyra stepped forward, her psi blades shimmering with barely contained energy. "The Nigians will throw everything they have at us. We need to be ready for anything." As if on cue, the Shadow Dancer shuddered as a volley of singularity torpedoes slammed into its shields. The view screen flared with blinding light as a trio of Nigian battlecruisers emerged from the planet's shadow, their hulls overflowing with weapons. "Evasive maneuvers," Tezor yelled, his fingers flying over the controls. The Shadow Dancer jinked and wove, its phase drive screaming as it dodged the incoming fire. Marcus and his crew raced to the battle stations, their hearts pounding with adrenaline. In the gunner's chair, Galen targeted the nearest battlecruiser, his plasma cannons spitting streams of superheated matter at the enemy ship's shields. Kyra closed her eyes, her mind reaching out through the void to touch the minds of the Nigian crew. She could feel their fear, their anger, their fanatical devotion to the Empire's cause. With a surge of psionic energy, she lashed out, planting seeds of doubt and confusion in their thoughts. On the bridge of the battlecruiser, the Nigian captain clutched his head, his eyes glazing over as Kira's psychic assault tore through his mental defenses. For a moment, he hesitated, his finger hovering over the firing controls. That moment was all Marcus needed. With a wordless cry, he unleashed a blast of psionic force, the power of the seals amplifying his innate abilities 100-fold. The battlecruiser's shields shattered like glass, and Galen's plasma cannons tore through its hull, setting off a chain reaction of explosions that ripped the ship apart from the inside out. The remaining battlecruisers fell back, their captains suddenly wary of the small but deadly frigate that had just destroyed their comrade. Marcus could feel their fear, their uncertainty, and he pressed the advantage, the Shadow Dancer surging forward like a hunting cat. They broke through the Nigian blockade, the planet's surface rushing up to meet them. Tazor guided the ship through the roiling clouds of a massive electrical storm, the Tempest Seal's power calling to them like a beacon. As they descended through the atmosphere, Marcus saw the ruins of an ancient Antikythera city sprawling across the landscape below, its towering spires and vast aqueducts still standing after millennia of abandonment. The seal was down there somewhere, waiting for them to claim it. But as the Shadow Dancer touched down on the outskirts of the city, Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The ruins were not as abandoned as they seemed. From the shadows of the crumbling buildings, dozens of figures emerged, their eyes glowing with an eerie red light. Nigerian cyborg soldiers, their bodies fused with advanced technology, and their minds slave to the Empire's will. They raised their weapons, a forest of plasma rifles and neutrino cannons, and opened fire on the Shadow Dancer's hull. Marcus and his crew leaped from the ship, their own weapons blazing as they charged into the fray. Kira was a whirlwind of psi blades and acrobatic grace, her movements almost too fast to follow as she carved a path through the cyborg horde. Galen lobbed plasma grenades into the enemy ranks, the explosions sending shattered metal and burnt flesh flying in all directions. Tazor provided covering fire with his quantum rifle, each shot vaporizing a cyborg's head in a burst of ionized mist. But for every soldier they felled, 2 more seemed to take its place, the Nigerians' numbers threatening to overwhelm them. Marcus could feel his strength starting to wane, the steel's power straining against the onslaught. Just as all seemed lost, a shimmering wall of force erupted between the cyborgs and the beleaguered crew. Marcus looked up to see a dozen figures descending from the sky, their bodies wreathed in psionic energy. Arcturian psi-monks, their minds and souls devoted to the study of the universe's hidden truths. They landed beside Marcus and his crew, their faces serene beneath their hooded robes. "Fear not, Marcus Aurelian," their leader said, his voice echoing with ancient wisdom. "The seals have guided us to you, and we will stand with you against the darkness." The psi-monks raised their hands, and the cyborgs were lifted off their feet, their mechanical limbs flailing helplessly as they were crushed by an invisible force. Marcus and his crew seized the opportunity, pouring fire into the immobilized soldiers until nothing remained but smoking piles of scrap metal. With the cyborgs defeated, the psi-monks led Marcus and his team into the heart of the ruined city, their psychic senses guiding them through the labyrinthine streets. At last, they reached the central plaza, where a towering statue of an Antikythera warrior loomed over them, his hand outstretched as if to grasp the stars themselves. In the statue's palm, the Tempest Seal glowed with a pulsing blue light, its surface etched with swirling patterns that seemed to move and shift before their eyes. Marcus reached out to take the seal, his heart pounding with anticipation. But as his fingers closed around the artifact, the ground beneath their feet began to shake. The statue's eyes flared with a sickly green light, and its stone lips parted in a roar of primal fury. "Foolish mortals," a voice boomed from the depths of the earth. "You think you can claim the power of the Tempest for yourselves? You are nothing but insects before the might of the Nigian Empire." The statue shuddered and cracked, stone falling away to reveal a hulking form of metal and flesh. It was a Nigerian war golem, an ancient weapon of terrifying power, its body fused with the very fabric of the planet itself. Marcus and his crew readied their weapons, the PSI monks falling into defensive stances around them. The war golem lumbered forward, its footsteps shaking the earth as it raised its massive fists to strike. But Marcus was not afraid. He could feel the Tempest Seal's power surging through him, filling him with a strength he had never known before. He closed his eyes, reaching out with his mind to touch the golem's ancient consciousness. He saw the centuries of rage and pain that had driven the machine to madness, the endless cycle of war and destruction that had consumed its existence, and in that moment, he understood. With a wordless cry, Marcus unleashed the full might of the Tempest Seal, a blinding bolt of lightning erupting from his outstretched hand. The war golem staggered back, its metal skin cracking and sparking as the elemental energy tore through its body, The Psi monks added their own power to the assault, waves of telekinetic force slamming into the golem from all sides. Galen and Tizor poured plasma and quantum fire into the machine's weakening frame, while Kira darted in and out of range, her Psi blades slicing through its metal flesh seamlessly. In a final desperate act of defiance, the war golem lunged forward, its fists raised to crush Marcus beneath their weight. But Marcus stood his ground, the Tempest seal blazing like a star in his hand. He met the golem's charge head-on, his psionic shield absorbing the impact of its blows. With a roar of triumph, he drove his ion blade deep into the machine's core, the seal's power guiding the strike to its target. The war golem shuddered and collapsed, its ancient frame crumbling to dust as the Tempest seal's energy consumed it from within. Marcus stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving with exertion, the seal clutched tightly in his fist. The Psi monks bowed their heads in respect, their leader stepping forward to place a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You have proven yourself worthy, Marcus Aurelian," he said, his voice filled with quiet awe. "The Tempest seal has chosen you as its champion, and with its power, you will lead us to victory against the Nigean scourge." Marcus nodded, his eyes blazing with newfound grit. "We have the seal, but our work is far from finished. The Nigeans will stop at nothing to prevent us from assembling the 12, and we must be ready for whatever they throw at us next." With the Tempest seal secured, Marcus and his crew returned to the Shadow Dancer, the Psi monks joining them as new allies in their quest. As the ship lifted off from the planet's surface, Marcus looked out at the stars, his mind already racing ahead to the challenges that lay before them. The Nigean Empire was vast and powerful, its armies endless and its technology advanced beyond anything humanity had ever known. But Marcus had the seals, and with each one he claimed he grew stronger, his psionic abilities reaching new heights of power and control. He thought of Kyrix, the brave Nigean researcher who had sacrificed everything to set him on this path. He thought of Earth, his lost homeworld, and the billions of lives that had been snuffed out by the Nigeans' relentless aggression. And he thought of the Phaedon anomaly, the cosmic horror that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality itself. He knew that he was the only one who could stop it, the only one who could seal the rift and rescue the star systems from annihilation. It was a heavy burden, but one that Marcus was ready to bear. With his crew by his side and the power of the seals at his command, he would face whatever challenges lay ahead, at any expense. The Shadow Dancer disappeared into the void, its phase drive leaving a trail of shimmering stardust in its wake. And in the darkness of space, the Tempest seal pulsed with an ancient, unbreakable promise. The 12 would be united, and the galaxy would be free once more. Tizor stood on the observation deck of the Free Galactic Alliance's capital ship, the Concordia, her webbed fingers interlaced behind her back as she gazed out at the stars. The weight of her new responsibilities as the Alliance's High Counselor pressed down on her narrow shoulders, the ghosts of fallen comrades whispering in her mind. It had been 5 years since the Phaedon anomaly had been sealed, and the Nigean Empire defeated, but the scars of the war still lingered. The Alliance had worked tirelessly to rebuild, to forge a new future free from the spectre of tyranny, but progress was slow and painful. A chime sounded at the door, and Tizor turned to see her aide, a young Arcturian named Zephyr, standing at attention. "High Counselor, I have the latest intelligence reports for you to review." Tizor nodded, taking the proffered datapad. As she scrolled through the files, a frown creased her amphibian features. "More disappearances?" she asked, her voice tight. Zephyr shifted uneasily. "I'm afraid so. A Procyon battlecruiser, the Hammer of Dawn, vanished without a trace in the Orion sector, and a cloister of Psi monks on Zephyrus Prime has gone silent." Tizor's heart clenched. The Psi monks had been instrumental in the fight against the Nigeans, their psychic abilities turning the tide in many a desperate battle, and now they were gone, like so many others. It had started slowly at first, a ship here, a colony there, but as the years passed, the disappearances had become more frequent, more brazen, and always, They were connected to Marcus and the quest for the seals. Tazor had launched an investigation, but every lead had gone cold. Every trail had vanished into the void. It was as if some malevolent force was erasing all traces of the past, wiping the slate clean. She turned back to the viewport, her eyes distant. "Galen, Kira, where are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. They had never found their bodies after the final battle, never given them the proper rights of their people. It was as if they had simply ceased to exist, their atoms scattered across the cosmic winds. Tazor's fingers tightened on the datapad, her perseverance hardening. She would not let their sacrifices be in vain. She would find the truth behind the disappearances, whatever it takes. "Zephyr, ready my shuttle," she said, her voice crisp and commanding. "We're going to Tartarus Station. I have a contact there who might be able to shed some light on this mystery." The aide bowed and hurried away, leaving Tazor alone with her thoughts. She stared out at the stars, a sense of foreboding settling over her like a shroud. Something was out there, something ancient and malevolent, and it was coming for them all. And Tazor knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that it would not stop until the last remnants of Marcus's legacy were wiped from the face of the galaxy. The shuttle docked with Tartarus Station, a seedy outpost on the fringes of civilized space. Tazor stepped out into the dingy corridors, her hand resting on the butt of her plasma pistol. She could feel eyes on her from every shadow, hungry gazes that sized her up like a piece of meat. She made her way to a dimly lit tavern in the station's underbelly, the air thick with the stench of cheap booze and desperation. The patrons looked up as she entered, their conversations stilling as they took in her Alliance uniform and the steely glint in her eyes. Tazor ignored them, striding up to the bar where a grizzled human with a cybernetic eye wiped glasses with a dirty rag. "I'm looking for Rask," she said, her voice low. The bartender jerked his head towards a shadowy booth in the back. "He's waiting for you." Tazor nodded, tossing a credit chip on the bar before making her way to the booth. As she approached, a figure leaned forward into the light, his face a mass of scar tissue and chrome implants. "You're a long way from home, High Counselor," Rask rasped, his voice like gravel. "What brings you to my humble establishment?" Tazor slid into the booth, her eyes never leaving Rask's. "I need information about the disappearances." Rask leaned back, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on her. "Dangerous questions to be asking, especially for someone in your position. Might make some folks nervous." "I'm not here to play games, Rask," Tazor said, her voice hard. "People are vanishing, good people who risked everything to save this galaxy. I need to know why." Rask was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. Then, with a sigh, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, crystalline data drive. "I've been hearing whispers," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Rumors of ancient artifacts resurfacing, ones that were supposed to be lost forever. The seals of the Zodiac, they're calling them." Tazor's blood ran cold. The seals had been destroyed in the final battle, their power consumed in the sealing of the Phaedon anomaly. But if they had somehow survived... "There's more," Rask continued. "They say the seals have been corrupted, twisted into something dark and hungry, and that they're being controlled by a force from beyond the grave." He slid the data drive across the table. "Everything I've been able to gather is on there. But be careful, High Counselor. The truth you seek may be more than you can handle." Tazor took the drive, her fingers closing around it like a talisman. "I'll take my chances," she said, standing to leave. As she turned to go, Rask's voice stopped her. "One more thing," he said, his tone grave. "The name that keeps coming up in connection with the seals is Pryla." Tazor's heart seized in her chest. Pryla, the Nigen High Inquisitor, had been destroyed along with his flagship in the final battle, but if he had somehow survived... She nodded to Rask, tucking the data drive into her pocket. "Thank you," she said, her voice rough. "I won't forget this." As she strode out of the tavern, Tazor's mind raced with the implications of Rask's revelations. If Pryla had indeed merged with the seals, if he was using their power to erase Marcus's allies from existence. She shook her head, a grim determination settling over her. She would not let that happen. She would find a way to stop Pryla, to protect the legacy of the man who had saved them all. Even if it meant facing the ghosts of the past head-on. Back aboard the Concordia, Tazor pored over the data from Rask's drive, her eyes burning from hours of staring at the screens. What she found chilled her to the bone. The seals were resurfacing just as Rask had said, but their power was no longer the benevolent force it had once been. They were twisted, corrupted, imbued with a malevolent intelligence that sought only to consume and destroy. And at the center of it all was Pryla. His consciousness merged with the seals in a perverse symbiosis. From beyond the veil of death, he was manipulating the artifacts, using their reality-warping abilities to enact his final, terrible vengeance upon those who had thwarted his ambitions. Tazor watched in horror as the data unfolded before her, revealing the fates of Marcus's allies. One by one, they were being erased from existence, their very essence unraveled and scattered across the cosmic winds. Galen and Kira, the Psi monks and technomancers, even entire species that had aided in the quest for the seals, all were being consumed by Pryla's malevolent power, their atoms dissipating into the void. Tazor's fists clenched at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. She could not let this continue, could not let Pryla's vengeance go unchallenged. But what could she do? The seals were beyond her power to destroy, and Pryla was a being of pure psychic energy, untouchable by conventional means. As despair threatened to overwhelm her, Tazor's gaze fell upon a small crystalline device set into the console before her. It was a psionic resonator, a tool used by the Alliance's most powerful telepaths to amplify their abilities. An idea began to form in her mind, a desperate gamble that might just be their only hope. Marcus's spirit was still bound to the seals through his final sacrifice, his essence woven into the very fabric of their power. If she could somehow reach him, summon his consciousness back from the void, together they might have a chance of stopping Pryla and breaking his hold over the seals. Tazor's hand shook as she reached for the resonator, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She knew the risks, knew that what she was attempting was beyond the boundaries of known science and mysticism. But she had no choice. The future of the cosmos hung in the balance, and she would not let Marcus's sacrifice be in vain. With a deep breath, Tazor placed the resonator against her temple and closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind, her consciousness expanding beyond the confines of her physical form. At first there was nothing but darkness, a yawning void that threatened to swallow her whole. But then, in the distance, she saw a flicker of light, a faint glimmer of hope amidst the shadows. Tazor focused her will, pouring every ounce of her psychic strength into the connection. The light grew brighter, more distinct, until it persisted into a familiar form. Marcus floated before her, his spectral form shimmering with an ethereal glow. His eyes met hers, and in their depths, Tazor saw the same fierce perseverance that had driven him in life. "Tazor," he said, his voice echoing through the astral plane, "I knew you would come." Tazor's heart soared at the sight of him, her spirit buoyed by his presence. "Marcus," she breathed, "we need your help. Pryla has returned, and he's using the seals to—" "I know," Marcus interrupted, his face grim. "I can feel his malevolence, his hunger for vengeance, but there may still be a way to stop him." He held out his hand, and Tazor grasped it without hesitation. As their essences merged, she felt a rush of power unlike anything she had ever known, a cosmic wellspring of pure psionic energy. Together, they turned their combined might upon the seals, their consciousness diving deep into the artifact's etheric network. It was a realm beyond the physical, a place where thought and reality were one and the same. And there, at the heart of the astral vortex, they found Pryla. The High Inquisitor's spirit was a twisted, malevolent thing, a cancerous growth that pulsed with an unholy hunger. "Fools," he snarled, his voice a discordant screech. "You think you can stop me? I'm eternal, immortal, the very essence of the seals themselves." Marcus and Tazor stood fast, their psychic auras blazing with righteous fury. "Your reign ends here, Pryla," Marcus declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "We will not let you consume any more innocent lives." With a roar of defiance, Pryla lashed out, his psychic tendrils seeking to ensnare and devour them. But Marcus and Tazor were ready, their combined power forming an impenetrable shield against his onslaught. They fought back with all the strength of their souls, their psionic blasts tearing through Pryla's defenses like paper. The High Inquisitor screamed in agony as his essence was rent asunder, his hold over the seals weakening with every blow. In a final audacious attempt, Marcus and Tazor unleashed the full might of their psychic bond, a shining lance of pure mental energy that pierced the heart of Pryla's being. The High Inquisitor let out a final despairing wail as his consciousness was torn free of the seals, his essence banished to the furthest reaches of the immaterium. But even as they savored their victory, Marcus and Tazor knew that it had come at a terrible cost. The seals, drained of their power by the titanic struggle, began to crumble and disintegrate, their ancient energies dissipating into the void. And with them went the last remnants of Marcus's spirit, his essence inextricably bound to the artifacts that had sustained him. Tazor watched in helpless anguish as his spectral form began to fade, his features becoming translucent and indistinct. "Marcus, no!" she cried, reaching out to him with a desperate, futile gesture. "Please don't leave me again." But even as she spoke, she knew it was too late. Marcus's ghost smiled at her, a sad, tender expression that spoke of a love that transcended time and space. "I will never leave you, Tazor," he whispered, his voice growing fainter with each passing moment. "I will always be with you in the memories we shared and the bonds we forged." He raised a spectral hand in farewell, his eyes shining with a fierce, undying pride. "The galaxy is in your hands now, old friend. Protect it, nurture it, as we once did, and never forget the sacrifices that brought us to this moment." With those final words, Marcus Aurelian, the last scion of Earth and the savior of the galaxy, faded into the cosmic ether, his essence merging with the infinite tapestry of the universe. Tazor stood alone in the astral plane, her heart heavy with grief and loss. But even as she mourned, she knew that Marcus's legacy would endure, a shining beacon of hope and resilience amidst the darkness of the void. She would carry on his work, safeguarding the fragile peace they had fought so hard to achieve. For she was Tazor Ironheart, High Counselor of the Free Galactic Alliance, and the last living link to the forgotten heroes of the past. And she would not rest until the galaxy was truly free, until the memory of Marcus and the Antikythera was enshrined forever in the hearts and minds of all sentient beings. With a final resolute breath, Tazor opened her eyes, the psionic resonator falling from her fingers. She stood on the bridge of the Concordia, the stars stretching out before her in an infinite vista of possibility. There would be challenges ahead, enemies to face and battles to fight, but Tazor knew that she would meet them head-on, armed with the strength and courage of those who had gone before. For the spirit of Marcus Aurelian lived on, a guiding light in the darkness of the cosmos, and as long as that light burned, there would always be hope for a brighter tomorrow. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.